Welcome to another crochet tutorial with Cozy Rosie UK. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can crochet your very own granny mug rugs. This rectangular granny square is a really great project to work up quickly so that you can decorate your coffee tables or your outside spaces with a little hint of granny without it being too overwhelming. Before we get started, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and of course that notification bell so that you never miss out on another one of my crochet tutorials again. And if you enjoy this tutorial, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up so that more people can make these fabulous granny mug rugs. So the materials that we're going to need per coaster is we're going to need 40 meters of our main colour and 15 meters of our contrasting colour. So ideally you will make this coaster with 2 different shade yarns. I'm of course using one of my favourites, so I've got Paintbox Yarns Cotton Double Knit, which is a size 3 yarn, and I have shade in Tea Rose and Paper White, and these are such great cottons to work with. I originally did these in very different colours, but I've used all that yarn up. I used Coffee Bean, which is shade number 411, alongside Paper White, Buttercup Yellow and Bubblegum Pink. So Bubblegum Pink is 451 and 423, but these are the colours I'm going to use today to add to the collection because I only have 3 and they're all different, so I thought I'd make another different one. You're also going to need a 3.5mm crochet hook. That's going to help give us the smaller stitches we need to keep a nice solid firm coaster rather than a little bit of a flimsy one. Of course you're going to need a pair of scissors because we're going to make some fringing and a darning needle. And that's pretty much it. That's all we're going to need. So 40 meters of your main colour and 15 meters of your contrasting colour per coaster. So the pattern itself is going to be in US crochet terms. I will always try and give you the UK terms as we go. And it's worked in the round. So this is a variation on the granny rectangle. One of my favourite patterns and a great way to use the granny rectangle. So we're going to head straight into our pattern and we're going to start by making a slip knot. I just make a loop, placing the yarn behind and bringing the working yarn through the loop. If I can get my yarn to stop twisting, there we go. Just going to place that on the hook and then pull on the working yarn to tighten that to the width of the hook. The first thing we're going to do is make a chain of 10. So we yarn over the hook and bring the hook and the yarn through the loop on the hook. So that's 1, 2, 3, 9 and 10. So we now have a chain of 10, remembering that this one doesn't count as a stitch at any point. We're going to start by working into the 4th chain from the hook. So we've got 1, 2, 3, there's number 4. I'm going to place my nail there. We're going to yarn over the hook because in this first chain we're going to work 3 double crochets, which is a UK treble crochet. So we yarn over the hook, insert our hook under one loop of that chain, yarn over, bring your loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through those last 2 loops. That's your double crochet. We're going to make another double crochet right into that same chain. So we yarn over the hook, insert the hook, yarn over, bring our loop up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. Then we're going to proceed by skipping. So we've worked into this chain here. We're going to skip the next 2 chains and then work into that 3rd chain there, working another 3 double crochets. So that's 1, yarn over again and work a 2nd one. Then we yarn over a 3rd time and work our 3rd double crochet. Oops, it keeps falling off my hook. There we go. So now we have another granny stitch there. And then we should have 1, 2, 3 chains remaining. So this is our last chain. So into that last chain, we're going to work our corner. So we yarn over the hook, insert into that chain, bring our loop up, I'll just untwiddle that a bit, it's a bit fiddly, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then we're going to work a further 2 double crochets into that same space. That's number 2. And number 2. There we go. Oops, split that yarn a bit. There we go. So that's another granny stitch. So we have 3 so far. So to continue in this corner space, we're going to make a chain 2 on top of that granny stitch and continue to work into the end here. So we yarn over and work another granny stitch, those 3 double crochets. And that's the 3rd one. And then we're going to chain 2 again and work a further granny stitch again into this last chain that we've been working into, so all in the same. So we've done our chain 2s, and then we're going to work another granny stitch, which is those 3 double crochets. Oops. And what we've done is created 2 corners. So we worked 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets, and it kind of makes us turn so that we can work on the opposite side of our chain. So working along the other side of the chain, we're going to skip the next 2 chains. So there's 1 and 2, and we're going to work opposite this granny stitch here, working another granny stitch. So we yarn over the hook and work 3 double crochets into that stitch opposite. Don't worry if that hole looks big. Once you straighten it out, it doesn't look quite so bad. And then we're going to do the same. So we've done this middle one and we're back to this starting space and we're making our corner again. So remembering that our corner is made up of 1, 2, 3 granny stitches with chain 2s in between. We already have the first one here, so we just need to work the remaining 2. So we're going to insert the hook into that same chain space here that we worked the original. So not in there where we've just worked, not in there, but just in, you can see that a little bit closer, just in that space there. So we're going to insert that hook and work those 3 double crochets. 2 and 3. Then we're going to work a chain 2, so 1 and 2, and then we work a further 3 double crochets, and then we just need to work our chain 2, and we're going to slip stitch to the top of our starting chain 3, those 3 chains that we skipped at the beginning. So I've pulled mine out of the way because there's number 1, number 2 and number 3. And we need to insert our hook through that 3rd chain. So you've got the stitch here, right there. We don't want to work in there. We want to go into that chain next to it. We're just going to push through. Make sure we've got 2 loops. Doesn't matter which 2 loops really. Pull through and pull through to slip stitch. And that is round 1. So at the end of round 1, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 granny stitches. You've got the 2 corners, so 1 here, 1 there, 1 there, 1 there, and that is the start of our rectangle. So for round 2, we're going to work across to go into this chain space, into the space here. So we're going to slip stitch across the top of these 2 stitches. So we just insert the hook, bring a loop up and straight through the loop on our hook, and we do the same with the next stitch. And then we're going to slip stitch into that space between those granny stitches. And then we're going to start round 2 properly. So we chain 3. And we're going to work a further 2 double crochets into that same space. Because that starting chain 3 counts as a double crochet, that makes our granny stitch. And then we're going to work another granny stitch into the next space. And then we've reached this corner point again. So in the corners, every single time we're going to work the same thing. So we're going to insert yarn over, insert the hook and start this corner space. So the corner is made up of one granny stitch, a chain 2, and then another granny stitch, all in the same space. Oops. That's 1, 2, and 3. And that just keeps our corners in the right spot. So far you should have 1, 2, 3, chain 2 space and another granny stitch. And we're straight into the next corner and we're going to work the same again. So we work our 3 double crochets as our granny stitch, followed by a chain 2, and then we continue in the same space, working a further 3 double crochets, and then if we look at it, we can see that we've got our 2 corners to keep that rectangle shape. So we're going to continue back down this round, working 1 granny stitch into each of the spaces between the previous rows granny stitches. Oops. And it will take us back to the next corner. So you can see we've got that chain space there, so we need to work a corner, and we're going to work 1 granny stitch, a chain 2, and then a further granny stitch into the same space, and then we've got another corner that we're going to work into. So we work a further granny stitch, our chain 2, and then another granny stitch, all into that same space. Oops, goodness me, struggling with this yarn today. And then to end the round, or to join the round, there's no chain spaces between. We're simply just going to slip stitch into that chain 3 that we started the round with, aiming to get 2 of those loops. We're going to fasten off with this colour, ready to work our contrast colour. So just make a little chain 1 and then cut off, leaving enough yarn for you to weave your ends in. And we're going to join in that same space that we've just next to where we fastened off. So to join our yarn, you can do the quick way that I like to do, which is simply just to tie it on where we need it. Just means that it's very secure and nothing's going to happen to it. So literally we can just go into any space at all, and then we're just going to either fasten it on with a little knot to keep things really tight, or you can join it properly, but this for me is a bit quicker and a bit more secure. I don't need to worry about it coming off. So from here, I am going to try and work over my yarn, my ends, at least with this round. And we're going to start by just inserting our hook where the yarn's tied on, going through and just bringing it back through and up. And then we chain 3, which counts as our first double crochet. You can pull on your end just to keep everything nice and tight. And then we work a further 2 double crochets into that same space. And then we're ready to continue. So we're going to work in for round 3 as it continues. We're going to work another 3 double crochets into the next space as our granny stitch. And we've got another space, so we work another 3 double crochets. And then we've reached a corner, so you can see we've got that little point and that chain 2 space. So we're going to work our corner stitch, which is a 3 double crochets, a chain 2 to keep that corner space, and then a further 3 double crochets all into that same space. And then we've got just a normal space, so we're just going to work our 3 double crochets. and then we're back to our corner. We've got that chain 2 space, so we work our corner stitch again, which is of course 3 double crochets, a chain 2 and 3 double crochets. So you can see how great that contrast colour shows up against the other one, which is always great. But we're going to continue with round 3, and we just work another 3 double crochets into that next space between those stitches. And we continue with the same pattern, working those granny stitches all the way down to that next corner space. And once we've reached that corner space, as you can see there, we're going to work our corner stitch. So we've got those 3 double crochets, our chain 2, and a further 3 double crochets all into that same corner space. And then we're just going to work our way through that middle one there with just 3 double crochets. And we've reached another corner space. So we work 3 double crochets, a chain 2, and a further 3 double crochets all into that same corner space. Neatening that up a little bit. We'll weave those ends in at the end. So we've reached the end of round 3 already. Gosh, it goes round so quickly. And we're going to slip stitch into the top of that 3rd chain from the beginning of the round to join. And then we are ready to fasten off and go back to our main colour. So once you've done a little chain 1 just to create a knot to hold it securely, you can just fasten off, making sure that you leave enough yarn to weave in a little bit later. So you can rejoin in any of the spaces around. I just like to keep all my ends together so I can weave them all in at the same time, nice and quickly. And again, we can either tie on the yarn if you want to, or you can just do, I just find this the most secure way for me personally, but you do what, you know, you do you, whatever works best for you. For me, this makes it easier. I know where my ends are, I know that it's secure. And once again, once it's secured on, we're going to reinsert our hook, yarn over, bring that loop back through, ready to start our chain 3. And then we're ready to work our final round. Sorry, our second from final round. We're in round 4, aren't we? So once we've done the chain 3, we work a further 2 double crochets into that same chain space. That is way too loose, sorry. This yarn is giving me trouble today. Here we go. It feels sticky, it's really weird. 1, 2, there we go. So we've got our chain 3 and 2 double crochets, and then we're back to our normal pattern, working a granny stitch, those 3 double crochets into each space between the stitches up to that corner. And then we're back to our corner space where we've got that nice little chain 2, and we work another corner stitch. So we work 3 double crochets, a chain 2 and 3 double crochets. And then we've got that spaces in between next to, we're going to work our way along to the next corner space by working 3 double crochets. Oh, dearie me, this yarn is challenging today. Yep, so we just continue along to that next corner space, working 3 double crochets into each space. When we're in the corner, we do that lovely corner stitch, which is 3 double crochets, chain 2 and 3 double crochets. Oh, I've only done 2. Easily done. So we're ready to work all the way back down the side to our next corner space. So we're just going to work those 3 double crochets into each of these spaces between. Now I would love to know what colours you are working your granny's coaster up in. I am a huge fan of contrasting colours, be it a white or any kind of colour really, just as long as it's a very bold opposite to the main colour of your coaster. I think it's going to be quite striking. You can of course work these in one single colour if you want to, but why wouldn't you want a bit of flashy showiness on your coffee table? Once you're back to your corner stitch, we're going to work those 3 double crochets, a chain 2, oops, out, and 3 double crochets. And then we just work all the way back across again, another side, working those granny stitches in between those corners before we reach our final corner space of this round. And there we are. We just work our corner stitch, which is 3 double crochets. We're bored of me saying this now, but chain 2, that's what keeps that corner shape, and then a further 3 double crochets. These corner spaces are also what's causing the square, or the rectangle, sorry, to get bigger, because actually we're increasing each time we work into the corner. So once you've completed your round 4, just like before, we're going to slip stitch to the top of that starting chain 3. And that completes that round. Now we are actually on to our final round. So we're going to do round 5 together. This is our final round before we go on to our fringing. So we start by slip stitching across the next 2 stitches, just across the top of them, and then into that corner space, because we're not, into that space between the stitches, because we're not changing colour, just moves us along by 1. You can see that your coaster is nearly complete. These are so quick, aren't they? So for round 5, we're just going to repeat what we've done in the last few rounds. So we do our chain 3, which counts as our first double crochet. If I can hold my hook properly, there we go, 1, 2, 3. And then we are ready to work our further 2 double crochets into that chain, into that space. The reason I keep saying chain space is traditionally the granny stitch has a chain 1 in between them. But I wanted to keep this as little holes as possible so that it does kind of keep quite a tight finish. So I don't put a chain space in this one. Actually, quite frequently I take the chain space out. Who knows why? Maybe it's just my own preference. You can put the chain space in if you want. So let's continue all the way up to that corner space, working 3 double crochets into each space between each granny stitch. And I'm sorry, I'm not speeding this up. This is actually my crochet speed. Doesn't mean I work perfectly, but it just means I don't have to literally speed up the video itself. We are then back to the corner space, ready to work the corner stitch, which is, of course, as you well know, 3 double crochets, a chain 2, and 3 double crochets. And then we work across, working 1 granny stitch into each space between the stitches, across to that next corner. And then we're back to our corner space. So again, we are going to work 3 double crochets, a chain 2, and 3 double crochets. It's only 2. Why do I keep doing that? There we go. So that's our corner space. See how lovely and big this gets. And then we're back to working down the side. So keep working all the way around till you're back to your final join, and I'll meet you at the end of round 5 so we can weave in all the ends and get our fringe added to make it really stand out. So once we've completed our round 5. To join, as always, we're going to slip stitch to the top of that chain 3. And then we are ready to fasten off. Now, if you want to, I'm going to actually slip stitch across the next 2 stitches just to make it even easier for me to weave in. And then I'm going to work into that kind of space between the stitches and fasten off. So I've done a little chain 1 as a little knot, and then I'm ready to leave a nice long tail so that we can weave these ends in. If like me, you've just seen I've flattened my corners out. Actually, they've stayed down quite well. That's the joy of cotton. It just stays where you put it. But if you're finding that your corners are curling a little bit, don't worry, because the fringing will help straighten that up. So at the moment, all my ends are on the wrong side of my yarn. That is exactly where I want them to be. But just get all those ends woven in, and then we're going to do some fringing. Now, this is no fancy way of doing fringing. It's exactly the same. I'm just going to show you where you're going to place them on this coaster and what length I think they look great at too. So I'll see you in a moment for our fringing. So to add our fringing, we're going to make 30 strands or 28 strands, depending on how far you want to go across. And we're going to place 2 strands into each of the stitches. So my top tip for making fringing is to get something, oh, just moved everything, is to get a hard something or other to work around. Now this isn't ideal, it's got arms on it, but it just gives you an extra couple of centimetres. These are going to be slightly shorter than what I made on here because I used my plastic box the first time. And I'm just going to wrap around 30 times. And an extra one for good measure, of course. And then very simply, if you put them all together, you can just cut along where one of the ends is. Oh, we do need an end there as well. And they will all be the same length, which for me just saves so much time. So I've now got 30 strands that are probably as long as the other strands, that are all the same length roughly. And you can see that when you put them on, there's not that much trimming to do. So I'm going to show you a couple, and then I'm going to trim the other end so you can see how to finish. So I literally just fold 2 strands in half, and then with my crochet hook, I'm going to go into the first stitch. I'm not going to work through the corner because it pulls the shape out, for me anyway. I'm just going through that first stitch, making sure that the right side of the project is facing me, and I'm coming from the wrong side through to the right side. Loop that over so it roughly stays in the middle. Don't catch the other yarn like I've done. Just there. And then bring them through. And then you're literally just going to bring the ends through with your fingers, gently pull and move the knot up. And you're just going to work through each stitch across with 2 strands, and make sure they're roughly in the middle. Don't have to be absolutely perfect because we are going to trim these. Bring it through, move those ends out of the way, and then pull these ends through the middle loop. Oops. And that is all done. So you can just keep working all the way across this row so that you have a full fringe. Now once you're ready, I kind of do a bit of a hairdresser job. I make sure that it's as straight as it can be, and then I either place something on top to hold them at the length that I want them to be. So for instance, if I want about 1 inch or 1.5 inches, look what bag that is, and then like a hairdresser, oh my goodness, like a hairdresser, I place where I want to start, and I make my first cut roughly, and then I use that as a guideline all the way along. If you're worried about the kinkiness of the yarn, you can simply gently wet them and pull them straight, and then just kind of literally give your yarn a haircut. Another way you can do it, very hairdressery in my opinion. Also very close to my fingers. I'm the most clumsy person. There we go. And there we are, it's all roughly. This is why I am not a hairdresser. There we go, that's a bit better. So once it's all trimmed, save those to stuff your amigurumis with. And then you've finished your Granny's Fancy Coaster. So I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial and you're going to get a lot of use out of your Granny's little mug rug. I'm going to go and finish this cup of coffee, and I hope to see you again very shortly for another one of my crochet tutorials. Until then, keep it cozy and keep on crocheting.